Yes, indeed. Another NFL season is upon us, where boys become men, men become warriors, warriors become champions, and the Buffalo Bills become chokers. The battleground known as the gridiron, full of grit, determination, and glory. Fans clamor to the stadiums to cheer their team, to boo the opposition. Fans watch on television, and then get on social media to cry about Taylor Swift and refereeing. But at the end of the day, what football is all about is the test of will, the passion of competition, to exemplify greatness, to crown the best in the game. And in this video, we are covering none of those things, as we'll be talking about the 1992 Seattle Seahawks. Ah, yes, a team so pathetic, I couldn't even find a team picture for them. Likely because they were already on their way to their respective houses after the final game of the season before the visiting team even made it to the airport. Well, hey, the only thing they could really take solace in was the fact that, well, hey, they could watch Ken Griffey Jr. play baseball throughout September, as they eagerly awaited basketball season after. Okay, there are a couple of good things here, and I'll get to those. But to preface this, here's a picture of their cheerleaders. I mean, hey, they look happy. Mind you, they were being watched more than the team itself, so I can see why. But first here in part 1 of this video, we'll give you the backstory. Ah, yes, the symbol of a football team, I guess. Okay, jokes aside, the Seahawks weren't always bad, which we're going to be talking a lot about here. Far from it. They entered the league in 1976 as the city of Seattle was thriving. They had a new stadium known as the Kingdom. Sports would become more of the rage. Basketball, Seattle Supersonics entered the league close to a decade earlier, and they were becoming a very formidable contender. And a year after the Seahawks debuted, baseball's Seattle Mariners came to town after an already failed attempt at baseball expansion not long before this, but this was a good move and a much better handled one. That same year, 1976, saw another expansion team arrive in the NFL, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Well, the Seahawks can at least say they had a better advantage with a better logo. Okay, to be fair, the Winking Pirate is a guilty pleasure, but anyway, Seattle was also the better team in the first 3 seasons, and I mean that. They were actually 2-12 in 1976, not that great, compared to Tampa's 0-14, however, they might as well be Super Bowl champions. But they improved to 5-9 the following year, and were impressive 9-7 in 1978. That was mainly due to a new superstar emerging, and wide receiver Steve Largent out of Tulsa. And yes, indeed, the Bucs actually lost their first 24 games in their history before finally winning a game late in their 1977 sophomore season. They went 5-11 in their third year, and the Hawks were expected to improve in 1979, and well, they finished 9-7 again, but missed the playoffs again. And the Bucs made the playoffs! Yeah, the 10-6 record, that was very unexpected. They even made it all the way to the NFC Championship. Well, anyway, the Mariners and Seahawks were a hit in town, and basketball Seattle Supersonics in 1979 became the first pro sports team based in Seattle since 1917, that's right, 1917, to win a major sports championship. And that was when the Seattle Metropolitans hockey team became the first American club to win a Stanley Cup. 62 years. The 80s were looking promising ahead. Then disaster hit. The Hawks, despite Largent's great play and taking a chance on undrafted Milton Wildcats quarterback Dave Craig, in the first round pick of the 1981 draft, All-American safety out of UCLA Kenny Easley, they went a combined 14-27 over the next 3 seasons, bearing in mind, of course, the strike-shortened 1982 season. However, prior to the 1982 season, let's rewind to the 82 draft for a second. As first round, 6th overall, they took Jeff Bryant, defensive end out of Clemson, fresh off a national championship win. 6'5", 270 pounds, he's just what Seattle's defense needs, bring ferocity and quickness to the defensive line. Also later on, they would add more depth to their defensive line, taking a chance on defensive tackle Joe Nash out of Boston College. But indeed, as I mentioned, their 1982 season was a wash. They were 4-5, and so the dismissal of the team's only coach in franchise history, Jack Patera. But then they brought in the smarts of Chuck Knox, with 20 years of coaching experience in pro football, and won NFL's Coach of the Year twice in 1973 with the Rams, and 1980 with the Buffalo Bills. For the 1983 season, they drafted running back Kurt Warner out of Penn State, 3rd overall, and it finally happened. The Seahawks made the playoffs, finishing, 9-7. Warner, along with star safety Kenny Easley, both made the Pro Bowl. The rookie runner had 1,449 yards rushing, which was 3rd best in the league, while Easley had 7 interceptions, was a superb powerhouse at strong safety. QB Dave Craig had a great year, 4th best passer rating, 7th best in completion percentage, while Steve Largent had his 4th career 1,000-plus yard receiving season with 1,074. Their offense leaped from 2nd worst in the league in 1982 to 6th best. They won their first playoff game, decimating rookie John Elway, the Denver Broncos, 31-7 at home, and they made it all the way to the AFC Championship, shocking another rookie sensation at quarterback, Dan Marino, and his Dolphins 27-20 in the second round, but would lose that conference title, the eventual Super Bowl champion LA Raiders. But football in Seattle was hitting peak popularity. But 1984 was even better in many ways. A 12-4 record, their best regular season ever, 5th ranked in the league in both offense and defense, and 7, lucky numbers, 7 Pro Bowlers and 7 All-Pros. On offense, Dave Craig made his first Pro Bowl, was 2nd in touchdown passes, 5th in yardage, and 9th in passer rating. Steve Largent was a 2nd-team All-Pro, a Pro Bowler, 8th in receiving yards, 1,164, 2nd with 12 receiving touchdowns, and 9th with 74 receptions. On special teams, the Seahawks thrived. Kicker Norm Johnson made the Pro Bowl and was a first-team selection. He had the 3rd best field goal percentage of 83.3 and was 7th in kicking points. Rookie linebacker Fred Young made the Pro Bowl for the first time and was a first-team All-Pro due to his hard hustle and work on special teams. The grossly underrated Jacob Green got recognized at last with a 2nd-team All-Pro selection with his 13 sacks. Fellow defensive lineman Joe Nash was a first-team All-Pro and Pro Bowler for the first time and had 7 sacks. While defensive back Dave Brown, who had been with the Seahawks since day one, finally got his due, as this is 8 interceptions, 3rd best, got him a Pro Bowl and a 2nd-team All-Pro selections. Last and most certainly not least is Kenny Easley, a league-leading 10 interceptions, first-team All-Pro, Pro Bowl for the 3rd straight season, and for the first time, the NFL's Defensive Player of the Year. The Seahawks defense was able to overcome the defending champion Raiders in the wildcard round, 13-7, but the powerful Dolphins would humiliate them in the divisional round, 31-10, as they would go on later to win the conference. Coach Chuck Knox won his 3rd Coach of the Year award. High hopes for in Seattle. In the offseason, general manager Mike McCormick, who took over in 1982, was building this very strong club, and once again saw someone overlooked in the draft, taking the undrafted free safety Eugene Robinson out of the Colgate Raiders, a speedy and efficient back who was great at reading the opposition's offensive strategies. Going into the 1985 season, hopes were very high. The Seattles were given the 4th best odds out of all teams to win the Super Bowl. But what followed was a hugely disappointing year. It was known as the 2-on, 2-off seasons, literally. The Hawks would win 2 games, then lose 2, then win 2, then lose 2, and so on all season, actually finishing 8-8 and missing the playoffs. Despite Steve Largent leading the league in receiving, Craig put up good numbers as well. And Warner running for 1,000 yards, the team had trouble putting points on the board, however, and their offense slipped to number 13, while their defense remained in the top 10, and Kenny Easley had another huge year, but some saw this simply as a minor setback. And at the 1986 NFL Draft, McCormick took 15th overall, making a fantastic pick in John Williams, punishing bulldozing-style fullback who could turn up at speed when need be and catch short passes and gain significant yardage. He's from the Florida Gators, who, he can give Warner extra blocking as well as Craig. He was 2-time All-Southeastern Conference in both 1984 and 85, and he had 2,409 total yards rushing, including 659 in his last season. He also added 863 yards receiving, with 369 in the final season. In the 3rd round, 68th overall, the Seahawks also took a new defensive back, hoping to keep their amazing core strong for their future in picking Nevada's Patrick Hunter. And in 1986, things started very well. The Seahawks were 5-2 after 7 games and lost 4 in a row. Hey. But they won 5 in a row and still missed the playoffs with their 10-6 record. And yeah, the usual suspects did well. Kurt Warner, 1,481 yards rushing, 3rd best, Pro Bowl, 2nd-team All-Pro. Largent, Green, Young, all Pro Bowler selections. Special teams returner Bobby Joe Edmonds, another Pro Bowl. And a first-team All-Pro as well. Kenny Easley, however, missed 6 games, and Dave Craig again played very well, 3rd in passer rating, 6th in completion percentage, and tied for 7th in touchdown passes. Their offense ranked 10th, a big improvement. Their defense still ranked in the top 10, but they lost longtime fan favorite and mainstay Dave Brown to the Packers in the offseason. At the 1987 draft, they wanted to strengthen their defense. It was their offensive line, however, that really needed shaken out. It had never been overly stellar and consistent. At times, it was actually very decent and even very good. But there's a reason why Craig, by the time he retired, was the most sacked quarterback of all time. But 18th overall, they took defensive end out of Pittsburgh, Tony Woods. He was an imposing presence, 6'4", 282. and had great agility. He was a second-team All-East All-Star in 1985, first-team selection in 86, and a consensus All-American that year as well. Can't get much better than that. On paper, he's a great pick. But Craig had a good touchdown-interception ratio, and he was just getting hit all the time. And the fact that offensive linemen Harris Barton and Bruce Armstrong were still available, this might not have been the best move. They continued to build on their defense in the second round, taking 45th overall from Stanford, Dave Wyman, an excellent tackler with great speed, a two-time All-Pac-10, second-team selection in 83 and 84, and a first-team selection in 86. This is not a bad pick. In the 10th round, looking more towards their future, they take Louis Clark out of Mississippi State, a tight end who the Hawks, could use as a wideout. He had close to 1,200 yards receiving, including 378 in his final year, a solid late pick. And this is also, they took Brian Bosworth in a supplemental draft. Long story short, huge hype, was supposed to be a star. Bo Jackson made him his bitch, bad shoulder injury, he was gone by the end of 1989, and tried to be an actor. Next! Yeah. The Seahawks rebounded in the strike-addled season of 1987. They finished 9-6 and returned to the playoffs, but lost an overtime heartbreaker in the wild-card round to the Houston Oilers. Yep, Warner played great, ran for 985 yards, third best in the NFL in 12 games. Second-team All-Pro, Steve Largent, 912 yards, receiving. Second-team All-Pro, Dave Craig, tied for fourth in touchdown passes with 23, third in completion percentage, sixth best passer rating, but yet the media and even GM McCormick seem to begin to think he might not be the guy to get their job done. He's just not getting the job done, I guess. But their offense was ranked 6th, yet their offensive line was still very middle of the road. Defense, they actually slipped the middle of the road at 14th, despite a great year from Fred Young, who made his 4th straight Pro Bowl, and was first-team All-Pro for the second time. Kenny Easley had a good season. Jacob Green, good season. The Hawks were a good team. But this is a team that was on the verge of a Super Bowl contendership not that long ago. It seemed the organization had gotten somewhat complacent when it came to giving them further depth. And things were about to get worse. And there was an issue with Kenny Easley. The team was actually losing faith in one of the best safeties of the era. And they thought his backup, Paul Moyer, who in all fairness was actually playing very well and excelling, the team was willing to give up their best star on defense in a trade for a quarterback. Listen, Dave Craig may not have been perfect, but, he's consistently good. But, of course, 29, I guess, is old in sports. So they trade Easley to the Cardinals for quarterback Kelly Stouffer, who the Cardinals actually took 6th overall in the 1987 draft. But already there seemed to be a problem. Neither him or the organization could get on the same page, and to be fair, that's on both sides when it came to contract negotiations, so he sat out what would have been his original rookie year. He was a solid quarterback, not winning too many personal accolades in college, but did set school records at Colorado in 3 seasons. He accumulated over 7,000 yards passing, including his personal high of 2,604, 36 overall touchdowns, 7 in his final year, and a 56.8 completion percentage, 54.8 in 1986. But then there was a problem. Kenny Easley failed a physical and had a severe kidney problem. It actually voided the trade. But McCormick was so desperate to keep Stouffer that he sacrificed a 5th-round pick at that year's draft, plus a 1999 first-rounder and 5th-rounder. Are you f***ing kidding me? Was getting rid of your best defensive player really worth all this headache? It gets worse. Easley, still under the Seahawks umbrella now, was released, and he'd have to be treated for his kidney issues, and just like that, dropped by the organization like he was nothing. Easley would actually file a lawsuit against trainers and the team, as it was felt his kidney issues were due to be given an overdose of medication. The suit was settled out of court, and Easley took nearly 30 years to forgive the organization for this. The fans in Seattle really turned against McCormick, as well as ownership, which at this time had switched hands between the Nordstrom family, who owned the team since day one, to Ken Behring. Easley was one of the most beloved players in Seahawks history. The only saving grace here was that the Cardinals' picks actually never panned out that they got in exchange. But the 1988 draft was a busy day still for Seattle. Of course, they had forfeited their first-round pick due to taking bust Brian Bosworth in the supplemental draft the year before. But they made a pretty good pick in the second round, taking Brian Blades, wide receiver from the Miami Hurricanes. In addition to having one of the coolest names ever, he was pure speed and intensity and full adrenaline ahead. Some had passed him thinking he didn't have quite the right size, but the Hawks took a chance, and he was part of 2 national title-winning teams in 83 and 87, and a finalist in 86. He totaled 1,493 yards receiving in 4 seasons, 394 in his final season. In the third round, 75th overall, they stuck with receivers, taking Tommy Kane out of Syracuse. Again, overlooked due to size, he was a first-team All-Star in his final year in 1987. And he had a huge 960 yards receiving that year in the East, 14 touchdowns, which led the conference, as did his 22 yards a catch. He was perfect for long plays and could develop into a star potentially. The Hawks in the 11th round, 299th overall, took defensive back Dwayne Harper out of South Carolina State. He is very fast, he can keep up with any speedy receiver, it seemed, and this is a good later round pick for the club. But the big steal came as the Seahawks picked up undrafted linebacker from Southern University, Rufus Porter. He had a lot of heart, hustle, and he could hit. He could be used on a pass rush play or stop running backs from gaining yardage, and was good in pass coverage as well. But the theme here is size. When he felt as a linebacker, he just wasn't quite what they were looking for, and didn't really stand out. Now the Hawks needed linebackers more than ever, as they would lose Fred Young, 4-time Pro Bowler, to the Colts. Now you'd think out of the Easley disaster losing key players that this team would fall apart completely, but that's actually not what happened at all. As a matter of fact, the Seahawks finished in first place in the AFC West, their first division title, edging out John Elway and the Denver Broncos. Injuries did limit Craig to 9 games, but he was 6-3, while Stouffer played decently in some games. Craig was still second in the league in passer rating and 6th in completion percentage, and tied for 8th in touchdown passes with 18, and threw just 8 picks, and achieved his second Pro Bowl selection. Steve Largent struggled, but he was one of 3 players with 600-plus receiving yards. Fullback John Williams had a great year on the catch, and nearly 900 yards rushing, while rookie Brian Blades also had an excellent year. And Kurt Warner, yes, another 1,000-yard season. And Rufus Porter proved to be a steal. As his work on special teams, he was selected as a Pro Bowler. Seattle still had a great defense. Eugene Robinson played very well, as did the rest of their secondary, but Easley's presence was still very much missed. While up front, they're lacking a little more depth on their defensive line now, with Nash and Bryant seem to run into blocking troubles in many games. The Hawks' playoff joy, however, was short-lived. Eventual AFC champion, the Bengals, downed them easily 31-12. While the fans were still angry at McCormick about the Easley situation, they were still shocked when he was actually fired in early 1989, as he did do well in the draft, but again, time still didn't fully dictate that. And the team exceeded expectations in the season, however, which should be credited. But Beering made a million excuses, one of the main ones being that it was a change necessary for financial operations. So the fact that his close friend Tom Flores looking for a job, I'm sure, had nothing to do with it. And indeed, Flores was hired by GM, and hey, look, this is actually a good hire. Let's take a look. After retiring as a football player in 1969, he had a 1-year stint as the Buffalo Bills quarterback coach in 1971. But it was his hiring by the Oakland Raiders in 1972 that changed everything under the tutelage and staff of the great John Madden. He was the wide receivers coach. He held that position until 1978 and worked closely with the likes of Cliff Branch and was key helping the Raiders to win the Super Bowl 11. And only once in 7 seasons, a Raider failed to make the top 10 in receiving yards. In 1979, after Madden's departure, he took over as head coach. In 1980, led an improbable Raiders team all the way to the big prize, taking Super Bowl 14. He also won Coach of the Year in 1982, and a year later, led an even more dominant Raiders club to a Super Bowl victory in Super Bowl 18. He coached the Raiders until the end of the 1987 season. He amassed an excellent 83-53 record. But he has no executive experience, so being named team president and GM had some scratching their heads, and would wonder if he could get results at all. But again, he has experience in the game, very deep experience. And the Raiders are actually a bit of a mess when he left them too. So now he gets his chance to truly take the reins at the 1989 draft. The Seahawks offensive line, however, had improved significantly, but they were losing center Blair Bush to the Packers, but they wanted to improve on things for their core on Trenchman. In the first round of the draft, at 50th overall, due to the departure, a part of the deal when they parted Fred Young, they took Andy Heck out of Notre Dame. This is a good pick. A towering 6'6", nearly 300 pounds, he was quite agile for his size and could face any defensive lineman or linebacker without fear and take on the biggest and best. Fresh off helping the Fighting Irish to a national championship in 1988, he was also a first-team All-American. Heck was set to replace Mike Wilson, who was getting older, but some Seahawks fans were hoping the team would go for future Hall of Famer safety Steve Atwater to give them more strength in the defensive backcourt to offset the loss of Easley. And indeed, to offset the loss of Blair Bush, as I mentioned, Hawks took Joe Toffelmeyer out of Arizona. This was a solid pick, second team All Pac-10 in his freshman year of 1985, and a first team All Pac-10 selection back-to-back in 87 and 88, and won the Morris Trophy as a top offensive lineman in the conference. However, it should be noted that still on board at the time, future 5-time Pro Bowl center and 2-time Super Bowl champion Mark Stepnoski out of Pittsburgh. Yep, they left him to dry. And the Seahawks made more deals as they picked up offensive lineman Derek Brewls, who spent a season each in Washington and more recently for the San Diego Chargers. An undrafted trenchman at 6'4" and 281 pounds, Flores and company thought if given the chance, he could bring some depth in the future as a good hand. The team also picked up linebacker Joe Kane, who was drafted in the 10th round in 1988 by the Vikings but didn't make the team. Originally out of Oregon Tech, he had size and a promising tackling ability. But they didn't stop there. Another linebacker, this one undrafted, was brought to the Seahawks, Rod Stephens out of Georgia Tech, 6'1", over 230 pounds, and he was seen as someone who could bring just pure hitting and quickness to the linebacker core. But 1989 was not a good year. 4-game losing streak out of the first half of the season did them in. They finished 7-9. The hope of glory the Seahawks had all through the 80s was pretty much dead. Steve Largent was limited to 10 games and retired after the season. Despite this, Brian Blades had his first 1,000-yard season and made the Pro Bowl. Kurt Warner played all 16 games, but he didn't have a good year, scampering for just over 600 yards, but it would be later evident that injuries were starting to get to him. And indeed, his days in Seattle were over. He'd go to the Rams and only play 7 games before retiring. Craig again had great numbers, passing for over 3,000 yards, 21 touchdowns. Another Pro Bowl selection, but the offensive line fell apart once again, and he did have interceptions issues this year. Also, John Williams, still a double threat. Rufus Porter, still a warrior on special teams, was a first-team All-Pro. Their offense was ranked second worst in the league. Their defense was still passable, but it was the end of an era with Largent and Warner gone. As we enter the 90s, where did it all go wrong? I mean, this team was a contender. There was excellent talent. The problem seemed to be consistency above anything else. Players just couldn't stay on the same wavelength of hot streaks long enough. And their role players, the strong hands who weren't stars, weren't very strong in their roles at all. Their offensive line was probably the most inconsistent part of the club all these years. I can't stress that enough. And their lack of playoff savvy, yeah, okay, that was an issue too. Granted, most of the times they were losing to teams better than they were, but they just couldn't get past a certain point. The burner on Knox is now heating up. Also, Bearing sucks. His ownership tactics just rub people wrong on both within the organization and fans. The Hawks haven't made that big a deal or a monster draft pick in quite some time. They made some very excellent ones, but they need to really make that big splash. At the 1990 draft, that would indeed be the case. To strengthen their defensive line, the Seahawks, third overall, due to a deal with the Patriots, took defensive tackle Cortez Kennedy out of Miami. What a dominant force, 6'3", over 300 pounds. He impressed scouts with his quickness and power combo of skills. He could take down any offensive lineman. He could spin, cut, make great moves to put pressure on his targets. He's also very smart and strategic. He could often already read where the ball might be going. Against the pass, the run, this could be the guy who reinvigorates the Seahawks defense. He led the Hurricanes to 2 national championships in 87 and 89. And also in 1989, he was named a second-team All-American. The Hawks in the second round wanted to add more depth to their linebacking core and took Terry Wooden out of Syracuse, a third-team All-American in 1989, and back-to-back All-East selection in 88 and 89. A great tackler with tremendous hustle and focus and pure power. 5 picks later at 34th overall, they took Robert Blackmon as defensive back for the safety position out of Baylor. He was a tremendous cover man against receivers, and he was a hard hitter too. A first-team All-Southwestern Conference in 87 and 89, and a second-team selection in 88. This wasn't a bad pick, but considering Leroy Butler was still unselected, a consensus All-American no less, and he'd actually go on to be a Hall of Famer for the Packers. The Hawks, however, made an unexpectedly good pick in the 4th round at 89th overall. They took Chris Warren out of Ferrum in Virginia. And there were hopes of covering their loss of Warner. He had speed and tremendous size as well and be able to run over opposing defensive players. But the Hawks didn't really seem to be building on a formidable offensive line still. However, in the 8th round, they did take 6'6", 296-pound Bill Hitchcock out of Purdue, a native of Kirkland Lake, Ontario. In the offseason, they did acquire a much-needed tight end and picked up Ron Heller, a talented blocking end which could no doubt help Seattle in an area they need to improve on. He was very good on special teams plays to boot. He spent his first 3 seasons with the San Francisco 49ers and actually collected a Super Bowl ring while there. He spent the 89 season with the Falcons, catching a career-high 324 yards. In his 4 professional seasons, he had caught for 629 yards, 4 touchdowns on 59 receptions. 1990 was a wild one. The team started off 4-6, but won 3 in a row, and then lost 5 of their next 6 games. They finished the season 9-7. They were in the thick of things, but were officially eliminated in the final week of the season, did not make the playoffs. However, the season is noted for a memorable game in Week 10 against the Chiefs, when Dave Craig took a beating. He got sacked by Derek Thomas 7 times. They were trailing 16-10 in the final play of the game. Craig looked like he was about to be sacked by Thomas for an 8th time, but he escaped and threw a game-winning touchdown to longtime mainstay Paul Scanzi from 25 yards out to win the game 17-16. But now the fan base was growing tired of mid-mediocrity. This team wasn't necessarily terrible. They were simply average, or at times just above and below average. The offense was meh, despite great performances from John Williams, who made his first Pro Bowl, garnering 714 yards, rushing that is, and 699 yards receiving. Brian Blades, however, struggled, while Tommy Keane had a decent year. Dave Craig played every single game and took every single snap. However, this would be one of the rare times in his career he threw more interceptions than touchdowns. However, he was still 8th in passing average and tied for 4th in completion percentage. But also in the backfield, the Hawks had an unexpected star in Derek Finner. 14 touchdowns actually tied the league lead. The Hawks' defense improved drastically. Jacob Green had 12.5 sacks, which was tied for 8th best. Eugene Robinson had 3 interceptions and 82 tackles for another good year, while rookie Cortez Kennedy had 48 tackles. But the fact is, the Seahawks need a stronger offensive line. Say it with me. Offensive line needs to be stronger. But they took another quarterback in the draft in 1991. Stouffer hasn't really developed much at all, but they took Dan McGuire to San Diego State, which means they passed on Todd Marinovich. Thank God for that, I guess. This was an overall weak year for quarterbacks, but except for, of course, some guy from Southern Miss in the second round named Brett Favre. Yeah. Anyway, the Seahawks took wide receiver Doug Thomas out of Clemson, and in the 3rd round took David Daniels out of Penn State, another receiver. But after 9 seasons, kicker Norm Johnson left the team to join the Atlanta Falcons. So, 98th overall in the 4th round, the Hawks took John Casey out of Georgia. He had 217 kicking points and a 70.8 field goal percentage in 4 seasons for the Bulldogs, and in his final year had 67 points and a 79.2 field goal percentage, and was a 2nd team All-Southeastern Conference selection. A tremendous long-distance and clutch kicker. He can be counted on with the game on the line. The Seahawks also needed a new punter, and they got one in Rick Tootin. He started his career with a brief 2-game tenure with the Eagles in 1989, but joined the Buffalo Bills as their full-time punter in 1990. In his season with the Bills, he punted 2,107 yards, and averaged 39.8 yards a punt, and played in Super Bowl 25. And the 1991 season started well enough. 5-4, the Seahawks were up to 9 games, but would win only 2 of their next 7. Finishing 7-9, of course, missed the playoffs. Hey, their defense was the highlight of the season. They were ranked 8th best in the league. Cortez Kennedy emerged as a huge star. 73 tackles. It's a nightmare for anyone running or catching a short pass, or a quarterback for that matter, as a 6.5 sacks would show. And he got his first Pro Bowl selection. Rufus Porter, meanwhile, had 85 tackles and 10 sacks. Another great year. Terry Wooden broke out with his sophomore year with 105 tackles, 4 fumble recoveries. Eugene Robinson continued to anchor the secondary with 5 interceptions and 93 tackles. But the offense just kept getting worse. Ranked 20th in the league, and the QBs were the story, but not a very great one. But once again, Dave Craig, again limited to injuries, however, well, sadly was 4-5 as a starter, but he led the league in completion percentage with 65.6. Jeff Kemp was so bad that he was dealt to the Eagles during this season. He went 2-3 as a starter through just 4 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. Kelly Stouffer, the guy they were supposedly gearing up for the future, threw for 57 yards in 2 games. Dan McGuire, the first-round draft pick that they picked to be their future as well, went 3 for 7 for 27 yards and an interception in his only appearance. Brian Blades, however, rebounded this year with a 1,000-yard season, while John Williams continues to be their most consistent star on offense, 741 yards rushing, 499 yards receiving, and another Pro Bowl selection. Tommy Keane also had a decent year with 700 yards receiving, but Derek Finner battled injury issues, missing 5 games. When healthy, he didn't play very well. How did it get to this point? A team that had all the makings of a Super Bowl contender at one point, just marred into mediocrity. Injuries, of course, did play a factor in some ways, but again, above all, as I said before, it was just consistency and not being able to stay hot long enough. But also, it might be asked, was it Craig's inability to engineer a winning club or an inability to win in the playoffs? I mean, he certainly had that. Usually the Seahawks could, again, as I mentioned earlier, ended up being eliminated by really good teams. But again, when something's not working, it does eventually have to change. Their offense at this point, they have talent, I guess, but a lot of things are just taking a toll. Still a huge problem. Despite the great numbers that Craig has put up over the years, sometimes failure to get the ball into the end zone or put any points on the board proven to be a problem in certain situations. And how about drafting? I mean, okay, McCormick had been great at finding talent and had a solid scouting team. And sure, as I mentioned, they missed a few opportunities that could have benefited them, but no worse, I guess, than most other teams in the NFL in this era. And many did much worse. Seems to me it's also sometimes just plain bad luck. Especially luck of the draw where the Seahawks often were in the draft. Just seems for what they were looking for and what they needed, it was already taken before they could get it. Flores is having the same issue since he took over. And one thing both GMs have in common is their inability to build and produce, here we go again, an offensive line that can allow quarterbacks to thrive. Seattle in 1991 was the 10th most sacked team in the league. A consistent problem that has dated back years. And again, they missed chances on drafting great talents that could have made a difference there in terms of the offensive line. The defense, meanwhile, has stayed steady despite a few down points here and there, but for the most part have looked amazing. And they still look great at this time. What about ownership? Well, the Nordstrom's have their issues, but at the same time, not near as much as Behring does. He just doesn't seem to grasp certain things about the game and lets certain mindsets get in the way of what's good for the team. And alas, Dave Craig's days in Seattle after 12 seasons and 9 as their starter are officially over. And yes, I do understand the decision to a certain point. Fact is, he's now suffering injuries, and isn't getting the job done in the grand scheme of things after all these years. No matter how good that quarterback may be, and even the cracks in the team around him, a change is still needed in that position. But here's the other side of the coin. It's clear that Stouffer and McGuire are not cut out to lead this team yet. So I think they dropped Craig a little hastily and maybe just a year or two too early. This was a huge mistake in my opinion in terms of timing, and Craig would sign with the Kansas City Chiefs. Also, Jacob Green was being one of their best defensive linemen. Yeah, he was their best defensive lineman all these years. Recorded 115.5 career sacks, was grossly underrated. And he left as well, and of course his career would sadly be over soon after. He'd only played 2 games for the 49ers in 1992 before retiring, but this still leaves a hole in the defensive line. But the biggest departure of all comes to the sidelines. Chuck Knox, after 9 seasons, was finished as head coach of the Seahawks. And again, you understand the logic here. Look, Knox was a tremendous coach. He was a brilliant football mind. And when given the right tools to do so, he could lead a team to some great things. But sadly, he wasn't always given the right tools and failed to lead his team to prominence. But, again, the times where he did have a short bit of success, he was not truly able to execute a winning strategy, and in the playoffs, where it mattered most, he was very much outcoached. His legacy always was make a team great, turn them around, but it never lasted. At least in Seattle, he had a lot more success than some of his prior stops. He took a job with the Rams in 1992, the same team he started his coaching career with, back in his head coaching career, I should say, back within the 1970s. But he was dismissed after 3 straight losing seasons after 1994, and he never coached again. So, what will 1992 bring? Well, you already have a pretty good idea. But what will the draft bring? How will this quarterback situation be solved? Who will be the next coach? How will this tragedy of Shakespearean proportions turn out overall? Find out in part 2 as we answer all those questions and more, and go over the season itself. In the meantime, like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, I'll see ya!